welcome to Global Topic Live. I'm Jim Kunkel.
And I'm Hiedi Brooks.
Hey, Heidi, welcome. How's everything going for you today?
Great, Jim. How are you doing?
Real good, real good. Earlier today, we had a really great conversation with our guest today, and I was really tempted actually to hit the go live right then and there because we were having an awesome conversation.
Oh, yeah, with an awesome person, Jane Brown with Brown Corrosion Services. She's well respected in the AMP community and CEO again of Brown Corrosion Services. Hi, Jane.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Nice for you to be here.
Hey, Jane, if you could do a favor for those who might be watching who might not know about Brown Corrosion Services, could you talk a little bit about what you do globally?
Sure. We're an primarily internal corrosion monitoring company and cathodic protection company in Houston, Texas. We've been in business about 26 years, and my father, Jerry Brown, and I started the company together. And we work pretty much, we've worked everywhere, Africa, Asia, South America. It's been a fun trip, a fun journey. And, our primary business had always been the internal corrosion monitoring. And over the years, we've segued into slightly different areas, failure analysis and the CP and quite a bit of testing work and things of that nature. But I'll say my first love is the monitoring. It's, to me, a really fascinating part of our business.
Very good. Jane, let me ask you this question. When we're looking at really pipelines, when it comes to moisture in pipelines, what can happen to the internals of a pipeline due to moisture?
Sure. So, the old adage is no water, no corrosion. And, one of the fallacies, unfortunately, is people will say, well, I have a dry line. Well, if you've ever hydro tested your line, you've ever had, a water upset, you now have water in your line forever to different degrees. Now, that can cause very minute issues, but it can also cause really big issues. So the truth of a dry line, I would say, is a little, it's a good fantasy, but it might be just that, unfortunately. Drying a line is, again, I'm not a line dryer, so I won't speak to this, but it's not a perfect science like a lot of what we do. And so, of course, over, my 30-year career, I've seen that line drying has gotten a lot better. The chemicals used in it, the mechanical products to dry lines, it's definitely better than it used to be, but it's not perfect. And, if you have dead legs in your system where water can collect, people now change the directions of their flow, they're buying assets and losing assets, and all these things sort of add to a really tricky situation. And always, being able to track, even where the moisture is coming in and out of the line, being able to dry it or, manage it with chemistry. It's getting to be tough now, especially in the U.S. market. We see assets that in the last 20 years have had 10 owners.
Mm-hmm.
So that really makes it challenging for corrosion personnel in the field, to tackle those issues. And we would like to think that we've got it all in hand, but the reality is we still see plenty of failures related to internal corrosion, unfortunately. And getting a handle on it is always a little bit easier said than done. For sure.
Definitely, for sure. So I'm gonna cheat here, and I'm gonna read this because it's a very interesting statement here from the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, which is part of the U.S. Department of Transportation. Now, they mandate that each operator, which would be the pipeline operators, they must develop and implement a monitoring and mitigation program to identify potentially corrosive materials in the fluid being transported and mitigate the corrosion effects. Now, that's a lot to say there. What situations have occurred to make the federal government make such very strict mandates for the pipeline operators?
Right. Well, unfortunately, with a lot of things in the corrosion business, we are reactive. And I apologize, I don't know the exact date, 14 years ago, I believe it was, we had the El Paso failure. A family was camping underneath an overpass. There was a leak, there was a collection of gas and an explosion. And essentially it wiped out 2 families. Things like that not only changes the public's perception, but also the government is then mandated to make sure that we're all doing our jobs. And I think after that happened, the Department of Justice did an investigation, and they said, there must be a mandate to do some monitoring. Now, again, it's like many mandates. There's multiple ways to skin that cat. There's people who do the bare minimum, and then there's the people who take the directive as a very serious cause and say, okay, look, is our system similar to that? Could we have a similar issue? And I think for many of us, there is a general political perception now that oil and gas is not a positive thing. You look at, say, Line 5 in Michigan, where people have really, pushed back about having it in their backyard. And so we're always fighting this narrative that we're not a safe industry. And so the government, I think in mandating this said, not only do we expect you from a social perspective to become more responsible, but we're going to somewhat force you to get there, whether you like it or not. So I think, overall, it's been a net positive in the business. I think it has caused people to be a little more circumspect. I would say with the advent of really wonderful coatings now and extremely globally competent cathodic protection people, the outside of our lines, we've done overall a very, very good job. Internal, on the other hand, sort of is a little bit of the redheaded stepchild. People either don't understand it, or they don't really want to understand it, or again, you can't see it. So it's the great unknown. Mm-hmm. And, through this, we've had, say, intelligent pigging, which is a wonderful inspection method, a great snapshot to what's going on. But again, because that is so technical, it's changing over the years. And a intelligent pig run 30 years ago is not the same as an intelligent pig run now. I mean, they're worlds apart in technology, and they've made real strides that have been great, but that has left us with, there's gaps. When the El Paso failure happened, one of the things that came up was a lot of lines in the US are not piggable. There's no inspection method that you can, suitably use really to look at them. And so I think the government recognized that. We were actually involved in the court case on that. So got a little, interesting look-see about what the government was looking at, but they said, there's limitations, but we want to ask people to sort of step up to the plate, use the technologies that are there and really be responsible so we can start, having the inside be as good as the outside.
Mm-hmm. Very good. You're talking about with intelligent, with pigging and everything like that. When I started with SSPC, the Society for Protective Coatings, oil and gas pipeline was a focus of mine. And, I got really, kind of immersed in the terminology and everything like that. And really looking at, for example, pigging, there are operators, there are individuals out there that really believe by pigging, you're going to get out all that moisture. For those watching right now that don't understand the concept of pigging and pipeline, could you kind of go through the basics of that, Jane?
Sure, absolutely. So, with pigging, we have, if I can say, 2 types. Basic pigging, which is used for cleaning purposes or sending chemicals through the line or different trains of chemicals, things of that nature, which I would say be in the possibly non-intelligent pig category, if we can put it there. And then you have intelligent pigging, which is really the purpose is to profile your inner geometry of your line. And so generally speaking, for the non-intelligent pigging, you have things like foam pigs and scraper pigs and cup pigs. And, there's a wide variety depending on the type of line you have, the pressure, the inner geometry, all these, different variables. And you pick your methodology and you use it to, and essentially in this case, say clean your line. The reality though is that there are dead legs, which are a significant issue. I'll say globally, we see them everywhere we go. And, those are, say, dropouts on a line where water collects. And even if you pig, and even if you have the best maintenance pigging program, you're not going to capture that. You see, if you go out to the field, we have a lot of fields now globally that are 60 or 80 years old. And you see old drop pots, things of that nature. And again, water has collected there. And essentially, when you pig, you can push the dirty stuff right down in there, and you've got a nice little safe space for that corrosion to fester and grow. And, that can turn into a problem. And a lot of the internal failures, I'll say the last 10 or 15 years, have been in these catch points that can't be addressed with pigging, unfortunately.
This is all really good information, and we've covered a little bit about the basics and of internal corrosion monitoring. Can we dive into it a little bit more? What would you say is the true definition of internal corrosion monitoring?
So I will start with this because people will always say to me, oh, we do monitoring, we pig. Mm-hmm. Pigging is an inspection tool, which gives you a single snapshot in time. Monitoring, conversely, gives you a view over time of what is occurring in the line. So the main difference would be is monitoring can allow you to go back and look at upsets or different things that occur in your system and try to correlate those with corrosion issues, as opposed to, say, pigging, which you're getting a single view. 10 years ago, we were here and now we're here. You don't know exactly when the corrosion occurred, if it was in a single excursion or it was, a steady ramp over time. You don't really know. And so monitoring addresses that need we have to go back and really find out what is causing the problems. And within the monitoring sphere, there's many, many methods. Mm-hmm. And every system, I would say, takes a little slightly different method. And you have to, like with many things in corrosion, we have to look at the economics of a system. Mm-hmm. If you have run a system for, say, 20 years and you have never had an internal corrosion failure, that system does not demand you go out and spend $200,000 to monitor it. And that is just a reality. Now, I'll say as a corrosion vendor, wouldn't that be fun if that's all I got to install? And I'd be wealthy too, and that'd be great. But there is a reality that for all of us in the monitoring side, we have to be very aware of, what data are we trying to collect? What are the risks involved? What is the past history? Or if it's a new system, what are the anticipated issues? And make a decision on the monitoring that makes sense for that specific job. And there's no projects that have a cookie cutter solution, in my view, for monitoring. Some take very little. You can have a 100-mile line, and if there's only one entry and one exit, your monitoring needs are actually quite slim. There's other systems where you have multiple feeds in. You don't know exactly what you're getting. those take more monitoring, because you want to know if, company A is feeding in, is the problem coming from them or is it coming down the way from company B? So you need, a very different outlook. And so I think that's personally, what I would say, one of the fun parts about corrosion monitoring is there is so much variety in it. And it's sort of a little bit of detective work, sometimes figuring out, how are you going to monitor? What is the appropriate method for what you're trying to do? There are many non-intrusive monitoring devices now, and in systems where you either don't have the personnel who can access the inside of the line, or there's safety issues, or a multitude of other things. You look at places like Nigeria, which I believe had a pretty big explosion last week when somebody tried to tap into the line. Places like that, you don't want to create necessarily an access point. You might want to use, an external device where if somebody tampers with it, the line's not going to blow up. So, everything that we do in monitoring, we have to look at, where it is in the world, the age of the line, what you're flowing. If you have H2S issues, obviously those are different considerations. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one of the really fun parts is there's infinite options and there's infinite possibilities. And I'll say, as a corrosion person, your job is to find the best one for what you're trying to find out, and right. I know years ago, high resolution electrical resistance monitoring got to be a thing, and everybody wanted it. And we had systems where we had the little $5 coupons, and for 15 years, people had been running at less than 1 MPY, corrosion loss a year. Well, they would say, well, we should get some high resolution monitoring. Well, there is a reality that your problem is not such that you will ever gain the benefit of the cost of that system. So although as corrosion nerds, we really like the data and it's really fun to look at, there's also a reality that in every system, we have to be realistic about what its needs are and make sure we're not overselling something that can have a very simple solution.
For sure. I think that's much appreciated in the community. This is great stuff. You can tell your stuff. You are not a corrosion person. You are a corrosion expert.
I was going to say corrosion nerd, but I do find it's very, very interesting. And, every project has its own hangups and its, own issues. And, we worked for years at a facility and they had like a huge amount of sulfur buildup. And so, you get to know these systems and they're kind of like your kids. They've got little quirks and, they're the needs of their own personal needs. And, some systems that have, say, intrusive devices, they're easy to work on. Some are really tough, but it makes for it certainly has made for an interesting career. I will say that.
I could imagine.
Yeah,
definitely. So Jane, let me ask you this. You're working globally with some of the largest pipeline operators out there and other entities as well. I don't want you to give away any trade secrets or anything like that. When you're working regarding these large footprint, pipelines running, all over the place, typically how do you recommend when it comes to them selecting the proper internal corrosion monitoring, and maybe it might be you're taking a blended approach versus something that's this or that?
Right. So our particular company, our goal is to always keep it as simple and streamlined from the get-go as you can. One of the beauties of I'll say internal monitoring, unlike maybe a cathodic protection system, is if you start small with CP and then find out your system is, say, undersized, it's a lot of work to go back and fix it. It's a lot of work to go back and put it in another ground bed or, buy another rectifier and get it hung and all this sort of thing. But for internal monitoring, we kind of kid about the $5 coupon. which is, if I can say, the workhorse of the monitoring business. If you start with a corrosion coupon and you see data that is either not as expected, or there's, say, significant pitting, or you're showing, the top of your coupon is gone and the bottom's just fine, then again, that is a very cheap and easy way to find out, okay, maybe I need to upgrade this system. I need to go to, say, a real-time probe, or I need to get some, external sensors on there to look at wall thickness. You have to grow your system organically. But in our estimation, you start a little bit more simply, i.e. inexpensively, and you grow your system as the need occurs, or you see that the corrosion is maybe possibly not exactly as expected, which does sometimes happen for sure. But again, when we start a project, we always look at things like, what is the asset? Where's product coming in? Where's product going out? What is the past history of the system? What are the future plans for the system? Again, that is a basis for a lot of what we all do in engineering. If we're trying to get a customer through 5 more years, it's a whole lot different than 30 more years. So we look at all those things. We look at the chemistry of what's in the pipe. We look at the company and, frankly, their personnel capabilities. I'll say overseas, for instance, in many places, labor is still less expensive. And so you can afford to have somebody go out and pull data off of a data logger device. I will say in the US and Canada, especially with COVID, we've seen this move away from personnel being out in the field. We're trying to look at automating what we can, sending data to a headquarters location when we can. And so all of those things come into creating a good monitoring system. And a good monitoring system, we're always looking at worst case scenario. You don't want to put a monitoring device where, I'll say, good rule of thumb tells you you're not going to see corrosion. That doesn't help anybody. But on the other end of that, there's also the reality that sometimes the worst case location, say at the very bottom of a hill, at the bottom of the line, would be a great place to monitor. But economically and access and safety wise, that's going to be very, very difficult to manage. So we look at all those things and try to take a very full picture of what we're getting into. And then from there, build a system that's going to, realistically meet the needs of the asset owner, meet the needs of the government and or state regulations, meet the needs of whoever the corrosion personnel are. I mean, we do meet certain people who love internal monitoring as much as we do, and they just, they really thrive on the data. They get a lot from it. They know a lot about it. And so people like that, are more naturally inclined to, monitor more. But, we have to make sure as the vendors and on any project that, we're meeting the technical needs and the government needs. But then on top of that, economically, are we meeting what a company can do? And is it going to get them the data they need to make good decisions? And then, of course, the last thing that we always talk about is customers have to use the data. And that, for many of us, is a struggle in a multitude of ways. And this goes for whether it be coating inspection or cathodic protection surveys or internal monitoring or intelligent pigging data, all of these things. Nothing matters if nobody looks at the data.
For sure.
And I'll say, we had some monitoring on a platform, this is going back quite a few years, but they had a failure. And they called us and they said, well, we didn't know about it. Why didn't your stuff pick it up? Get offshore. We got down there, got offshore. one of the operators had shut the system down. And so all the data was there. The alarm went off, but it had been silenced. You know, now they would have still had to shut in, but they would have had a relatively good window of early warning. And so things like that still happen. You know, I think we've all seen the government goes back after there's a failure, and they start looking at the data and they say, well, gosh, you had low CP potentials. Why didn't anybody notice that? Well, unfortunately, you know, sometimes people get reports and they get shoved in the bottom drawer, and, you know, the intent is to review and things of that nature. And, you know, personnel change a lot of jobs now. You know, back when I started my career, you'd often go to fields and there would be a guy who'd been there for 25, 30 years. He knew that field like the back of his hand. Well, with the, you know, nature of the beast, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but, you know, a lot of asset owners now, they want to move people around so they get, you know, a feel for the whole facility. And, you know, they're moving from different areas of discipline. They're moving all around the world, things of that nature. So that if I can say it, the old school expert isn't necessarily there anymore. And that makes it even more critical, the monitoring that we're doing.
Very good.
Yeah. And Jane, let me ask you this. You know, earlier you had said, you know, those high critical areas, you know, that they might not be exactly where you want to do a certain, you know, monitoring. And then there's some areas that, you know, obviously if they're less of value for failure, you don't want to monitor there. You know, is there any really super critical areas that you do recommend to operators that you have to monitor and then follow through with these monitoring procedures?
Generally speaking, and again, this depends on the system, but entry and exit points, low points, past failure points.
Okay.
And again, you know, this is why data is so critical nowadays, is often, you know, not on new systems, but we look back at older systems and there's a failure and we find out that at that one location, there's been more than one failure. But because of, you know, just data longevity and things of that nature, there's not knowledge of that. And so, you know, it's good to have a good plan in place that addresses, and good, I hate to say, good knowledgeable engineers and technicians who can sit and say, like, I'm looking at your PNIDs. This is where you have a probable cause location. There are a lot of modeling programs now, you know, that you can put in all your data and they'll go through it and say, you know, company, these are your critical locations that we think you need to consider. You know, and again, modeling costs money, but the benefit of that is that you, especially if you don't know your system, you might have a greater chance of monitoring and inspecting where those critical failures might happen. So again, it goes back to, you know, knowledge. You know, many companies now, I hate to say it, I hear this all the time. It's a great CP guy and he's like, man, my company foisted internal corrosion on me. They never sound very happy about it, which I just don't understand. But, you know, you have people and, you know, they're new to the business or they're young folks, you know, haven't had a lot of exposure. And so it's really important that they reach out to people who do know the system and, you know, find out the history of it, but also find out, you know, where the problems might be occurring so that they can, you know, best address them.
So, Jane, I got a question here. It popped up here from Maurice. Hi, Jane. Why do you think the oil and gas liquid pipeline industry has not more widely adopted the use of internal coatings linings combination with intelligent pigging for monitoring? Obviously, you know, using external coatings with CP. This could potentially reduce issues with time requiring for drying consumption of inhibitor chemicals or improving the cleanliness of the delivered products, et cetera. Sounds like he's talking about more of a balanced system.
Right. So, you know, certainly when it comes to internal monitoring, especially in an existing system, you really don't have a lot of methodologies beyond chemical treatment or coatings and linings internally to deal with internal corrosion issues. So as a person who doesn't do internal, linings, I will attest to that first, but I will say, to Maurice's question, I think the main detractor from it has been in the past. A lot of internal coatings have not necessarily worked very well. A few years back, I know we worked with a company that had used a pull-through liner, and the liner had actually, I guess you would say, buckled in. So there's been some past historical difficulties with it. And then I think beyond that, and I'll say this probably goes to an economic issue. Mm-hmm. When we're putting in pipe, especially in new systems now, the bean counters have a lot of stroke in many companies now. And this goes back to materials as well. If we could always use the best materials, our corrosion issues would go down. But to use the best materials is a whole lot of money. And there's not always the management in place to push that through. And then two, there's also, is the risk worth the reward? There's that question as well. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, I would say that goes back to coatings and linings. They work. There's a lot of really good ones out there now. But again, can you get the economics behind putting them into a new system before it's placed? And then, I think beyond that too, unfortunately, corrosion, be it external or internal, is still so often an afterthought.
Funny.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times people call and they say, our compressor station, we're going online in like 2 weeks and, well, we forgot about the CP. And it still happens all the time. It is not infrequent. And I don't think that's, negligence or anything like that. I think it's just, we're a little bit of a niche industry. We're a little, say, off to the side. And so we're not on top of everybody's minds when they're doing design to take those things into account. And so I think, with internal corrosion, coatings and linings, it just hasn't been at the forefront of solutions that people are thinking of. I think, a lot of people, when I say something about internal coatings, they'll say, flow assurance type coatings. Mm-hmm. People still don't correlate internal and coatings back to corrosion protection. They think of it, for other purposes, and maybe that's a marketing issue. I don't really know. That would just be my perspective on it. Not saying that's totally correct, but.
No, I think you are. And I don't want to take, I could elaborate on that, I think, a little bit, but I think you're correct. I would say that it's, especially with innovative and newer products, launching them and marketing them and having them tested, it takes, as we all know, it takes some time. But it's what you just said was very important. In the risk versus the reward should always be number one, and some people it's not. And so I think marketing comes into play.
Yeah. And I think, years ago, a very wise internal corrosion guy had said in a meeting, he said, our failure as internal corrosion people is that we have never sold to management how important a job it is that we are trying to do. Mm-hmm. And, we as corrosion engineers and technicians have never said to our companies, if we have a failure internally, it could be very catastrophic. Because we've all seen the pictures, when internal failures happen, your pipe sometimes just blows apart. And God forbid you're, like in the case of El Paso, near people but it's really dangerous. But we as corrosion practitioners have not possibly done the best job in really selling ourselves to the marketplace and saying, this is part of what keeps us all safe. This is part of what, keeps the oil and gas flowing. And, that's probably, I'll say, a deficit of all corrosion people. Maybe it's a little too much humility. I'm not really sure.
Well, it seems like they keep you pretty busy with reactive stuff. What would you do in a best case scenario? What would you do proactively if you had time?
I think, certainly, like I said, our company approach has always been, go through the system drawings, look at where, I'll say, our knowledge and our field knowledge come into play. Look at where you think you're going to have issues and start with, if I can call it, very basic monitoring. And, after 60 or 90 days, you start getting a feel for your system. And then if you need more information, you upgrade that to, say, a more real-time methodology. If you have really low corrosion rates and things are good, you've never seen a pit on a coupon and it comes in and it looks like the day you put it in, well, then you also have that assurance that, yeah, you're ticking along in the right direction. But like we always say to some people, if you're ticking along in the right direction, keep on ticking.
Right.
Don't stop the ticking, because that's when, we tend to get into issues, is when we get complacent in low corrosion rates and we don't keep our eye on the system. Because especially, I'll say, in the US market in particular, with assets being bought and sold, we're changing flow direction, we're changing the makeup of what's actually flowing. Things change over time. Assets age. Back when the Eagleford work started, it was pretty clean. It was pretty sweet. In the last 12 years, it has soured significantly. And so the corrosion rates have followed that. They are going up, and they will probably continue to go up. And hopefully we get to a manageable level by treating with, chemistry when we have to replace, putting in better materials, things of that nature. But I think that's really the only realistic way to go forward with it, and certainly, to Maurice's question, if you have a system that has had repeated failures at the same place, that's when you start thinking, I have to say, outside your box. Do you actually change your design of the pipe? Do you change the material of the pipe? Do you put a lining in? Do you use an internal coating? Do you, I hate to say it, change chemical vendors because maybe they're just not doing their job? That's when you have to, I think all of us have to not be lazy and really look at what all of our options are, and see what, not just what is new in the marketplace, but what in the past has worked, and one of the really positive things I think about SSPC and NACE and now AMP is it's the perfect forum. And, I've really missed it the last year, is seeing people at conferences or meetings and you say, man, I had this customer, and you tell them about this nutty little story and you get a lot of good feedback. Mm-hmm. And I think, one of the great things about the corrosion industry is we're all very enthusiastic about what we do, and we love corrosion and we love to talk about it. And so the sharing of information is so critical, I would say, as corrosion people to what we do every day, because sometimes your problem is actually not unique to just you.
A lot of times it's not.
A lot of times. Yeah. And it might not be the exact same solution.
Right.
Sometimes the ideas that it leads you to can be really a net positive, for your company, mm-hmm. or, us offering a solution to our customers. And so I've missed that aspect of it, seeing people and, hearing about all the stuff going on, because it's, I don't know. It's what keeps it all interesting and keeps the little cylinders firing for all of us for new ideas and new processes to do things, you know?
Definitely. And Jane, it's coming back. We'll all be seeing each other, gripping and grinning and everything else because we're all family, right?
Yes, for sure. It's it's one of the best families in the world. And I know we were talking earlier. I said we're literally the worst competitors ever because we all love each other. And, you know, even if your job doesn't work out, you hope, you know, your competitor does well following up on you. And, you know, so it's that's what keeps this business, I think, really a pleasure to work in my mind.
Definitely. Jane, I know you're on a tight schedule. You know, in kind of closing out this live stream, is there anything that you didn't leave with the viewers that you would want to pass on to them?
I mean, I believe in monitoring. I believe it makes us safer. I believe the data has many uses to not only, know if you do have a corrosion problem, but to make sure that your chemistry is working in your line. And if it's not working, you know, give both your chemical vendor and your company folks an opportunity to fix that. So, you know, I believe have monitoring. It doesn't have to be big. You don't have to start large, but you have to do it. And it's really critical now. You know, the government's onto us. I will say that. They, working with the DOJ, I'll say I was impressed with their folks in that they really dug into corrosion and where are the failures coming from and what is our responsibility as the government. And I would say we would all say some of government doesn't work very well. But this is probably one thing that, you know, for our country, especially in the US and, you know, some of the rules that have come out globally because of it has been a net positive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I would just encourage people, you know, keep monitoring, keep inspecting. You can't do one or the other. You got to do both of them. It's like all things in corrosion. There's not a single solution to anything. So, you know, we need all these vendors working together on behalf of our asset owners to, you know, to keep things going and extend the life of our system, you know, as we can, because certainly I was on a pipeline recently. It had been in service 72 years.
Wow.
So, you know, we're asking more and more of our assets. So we just all have to be, you know, aware of getting these life extensions done for them and using whatever methodologies suit the project.
I actually said that on the Coffee with Jim and James guests. I was saying on their show, but we were on Jim's show, Coffee with Jim and James, especially with some of the new pipeline projects being halted. The in-ground current assets are much, you know, you need much more attention in that area. And you did a really good job of demonstrating the services. Yeah.
And, you know, that's, you know, maybe one of the fallacies of, you know, say shutting down the Keystone is that we won't be moving the product. We will still be moving the product just in alternate ways. And, you know, rail car corrosion is a really big area. Again, we've done quite a bit of monitoring on rail cars. It's really interesting. It's, I would say, a little bit more extreme because of there you have nice little sloshing effects and things of that nature, you know, which is, you know, from a monitoring side, there's some different things that you see that are very interesting. But, you know, regardless of how we're transporting things, we have to know what we're transporting and if it's safe. And monitoring and inspection, that's just, it has to be a part of it for all of us now, you know, for sure.
Yeah. And another response here regarding, thanks for your reply. For Maurice, he definitely gave him a lot of good information there. Jane, thank you so much for this opportunity today. Hiedi and I are very excited to have you, and hopefully we'll have you on a future stream again soon.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it. It's been fun talking to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great day. Okay.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hiedi, I think what we ought to do is explain a little bit about you as the new co-host here on Global Topic Live. And
Yeah.
I'd like to start off and talk about on Tuesday, you were guest host with the co-host, I'm sorry, with the stream we did with the Coffee with Jim and James. And after we were done, my DMs just blew up. I was having people, who's Hiedi? You got to have her back. She's awesome. And that's why you and I are going to be co-hosting moving forward. So if you want to talk a little bit about yourself, here's the opportunity.
I said no. I'm kidding. I'd love to. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the feedback. I appreciate being called a co-host because I have, as I mentioned to anyone I speak with about you or your global topics, I've used them, especially the 2-minute ones, to start to learn. I love to learn anything about the corrosion industry. I love being proactive in any aspect, but especially in my job in the corrosion industry. I do work in sales and marketing for VCP Sales, and we carry 4 pipeline integrity products and specialize in innovative solutions with those. So I appreciate this opportunity of hosting, guest hosting, co-hosting, and I appreciate everyone's feedback. I'd like to take a moment to say if there is any further feedback about the show in general, or if you'd like to be a guest, or if you know me and you'd like to be a guest, you can message me, Jim. You can message Jim, but I definitely am looking forward to more Global Topics Live. It's a good casual way to have a great conversation and to take live questions. We can't do it without the involvement, although you come up with some stellar questions. And I appreciate the effort you put in, but just more engagement from the corrosion community, and any feedback, please bring.
Definitely. I agree with that. Hiedi, thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure, and I will see you soon. Thank you.
Everybody, please make sure to like and share this. You'll be able to see this stream actually on the original event post. You'll be able to watch it in archive. I'll also push it out on my YouTube channel as well, and re-promote it on LinkedIn as well. So next Tuesday, then a really great live stream. We're going to be talking about STEM. And let me go ahead and roll the promo for next week, or for Tuesday. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you.